I'm here today with Melissa K. Norris, and she is one of the most experienced homesteaders I've ever met, and I've met a lot. So she has been homesteading literally since infancy. Grew up homesteading, is now has a beautiful homestead, and is the founder of Pioneering Today. Melissa, welcome. Thank you for joining us.
Yeah. Hey, I'm super excited to be here. This is going to be a lot of fun. I've been looking forward to it.
All right, we're going to be talking about the five foundations of homesteading.
Yeah.
Yeah, take it.
Take it away. All right. Hey, guys. Well, welcome. So, you're in the right spot to be talking about homesteading. So, today we're going to be going over the five foundations for a successful homestead in 2025. But quite honestly, these foundations are going to serve you for literally the rest of your life. So, these are foundations that you can put in place. I hope you put them in place for 2025, but they're going to serve you long beyond just 2025. So I am sure that many of you are going to have questions, and I know Jason and I both are super excited. That's one of the fun thing about lives is to be able to get to ask people questions and have that back and forth and answer. So if you have questions, please ask them at any time throughout this. We've got an awesome team of folks who are going to be gathering those. And then when we get through our five foundations, then we're going to open up and we'll have a time for discussion and do some live Q&A. So feel free to ask the questions as ever they come up. Just type them in wherever you're watching this live stream, and just know at the end, we will get right to those for you. So
First
I am
question,
super,
Melissa.
yeah.
First question, Melissa. How is January, the first of the year, for planning to homestead in this coming year? How do you, when you look at your calendar, what do you think about January as a time to get started?
Yeah. January is a phenomenal time to get started, quite honestly, because it allows you to look at all of the seasons as they're coming up. You still have plenty of time in January, especially if it pertains to gardening. For most climates, like it's actually a little bit early, depending on where you're at. So you have plenty of time to start your education, to start planning things, and then have the time to actually implement them. So January is a fantastic time. And honestly, for most folks, even in the kitchen part with homesteading, January is a time where we're not quite as busy with outdoor activities. So it can be a really good time just kind of set those foundations in place that will then carry forward when you do get to what I hope is growing some of your own food, with a garden and that kind of thing this year. You already have some of those foundations in place to just carry you right through. So January is like a perfect time to start planning. Great question. Yeah. So, welcome everybody. I know some of you may be familiar with me, some of you might be familiar with Jason, and some of you would be like, I've never heard of any of you. I just happened across this live stream. So, in an ever fashion, you happen to stumble across this. We're super excited that you're here. So, I know many of you have gotten the opportunity to obviously read Jason's books, but hopefully you've seen the Homestead movie in theaters. That was a wonderful experience. I got to see it in the theater. It was super fun. And if you're not familiar with me, pleased to meet you. As Jason said, my name is Melissa K. Norris. You may have seen my website, Melissa K. Norris, or the Pioneering Today podcast, or our YouTube channel. I've been homesteading for over 25 years as a married woman, my husband and I, with our two kiddos. And we raise 99% of our meat, and I say 99% of all of our protein needs and meat here on our homestead because there's only so much bacon on a pig. And so we do supplement with bacon from some farmers when we go through all of the bacon and it's not quite time to harvest again. But we raise over 70% of our fruits and vegetables for an entire year for our family of four here on our homestead as well, and have been doing that for decades now. So, really excited to talk about what you can do in your home and on your property when it comes to homesteading and implementing those things. And so the website has lots of articles, the podcast, and videos, depending upon what your learning style is like. Um, so many of you, I hope, and if not, then this will inspire you to. Jason, do you want to talk a little bit about the Homestead movie and then the series, just a little bit for folks who maybe haven't had a chance to watch those yet or dig in?
Yeah, so Homestead grew out of the Black Autumn series that 28-year Green Beret Jeff Kirkham and I co-wrote published first in 2018. It's a 10 novel series that Angel invited us to produce into a movie, a television show, and a live unscripted show about homesteading. And while we tell a post apocalyptic story in Homestead, I think anyone who's seen it will attest it's also an amazing message of hope. And the hope is sort of rooted in homesteading itself. If it doesn't require a collapse or an apocalypse or the power grid to go down for us to learn that homesteading is truly a miraculous way to raise a family and to bring up kids. So we had the benefit of, I'm a homesteader as well. I haven't been doing it for as long as Melissa, but well over 12 years. And we found it's just this wonderful way to bring up a family. Why wait until the world goes sideways to invite your kids to get their hands in the dirt and start raising chickens and selling eggs? And it is one heck of a way to live. And we wanted to communicate that through a gripping post-apocalyptic thriller. So we hope you've enjoyed the movie and the television show, and of course live unscripted.
Yeah. And I have to say, I was really excited when I got to watch the movie as well. Um, because of the hope element. Like, I don't want to do any spoilers for any of you who haven't watched it yet, so I'm going to try to be really careful. But the hope and community message that was really shared and came through as a longtime homesteader, that is such an important message, especially to the longevity of truly being able to homestead and making it something that you're thriving in. So that was really fun. So I'm really excited for lots of things, and I can't wait to see the series and the rest of the series as it comes out. I think it opens the door to a lot of conversation, needed conversation for people to have. So, and I think the series is going to really help that conversation to continue to take place. And hopefully, those who are already homesteading, it will give them an opportunity to share with people who maybe are now, after they see this, maybe it will get them thinking about, oh, what are some things that I could do right now, which is what we're going to be sharing with you guys here today. So super exciting stuff. Thank you. All right. I am very curious if any of you guys identify with this, and that is, if you haven't watched Homestead, you may have already be feeling this, but then after watching it, it might have heightened that for you. If you are concerned about the state of our food, kind of our modern agriculture, a lot of the processed foods that we see in our grocery stores these days, our modern medical system here in the United States, as well as the infrastructure, so supply chains. And, I think over the past 4 years, for most Americans, I think our eyes have kind of been opened a bit to how fragile it is and how there are some things that definitely need to be fixed within these systems. But for many people, you aren't sure how to go about replacing your dependency on them. Like what else is there, or what can I do? And in a way that's very tangible and something that I can take action to today without having to necessarily buy, 100 acres or completely go off grid. But what are things that I can implement right now where I'm at? And start to take those first steps. So if that's you, wherever you're watching this live stream, we'd love to see that in the chat. So let us know if that sounds like you and that's something that you're like, yes, like exactly, this is how I'm feeling and I need to know these tips. If you want your family to have resources and not be dependent on the stores, but you don't want to waste your time or money. I know for most of us, myself included, time is a precious commodity as well as money. And it's something that we want to be good stewards of. And so as we devote our time and or our money, and sometimes it's both of those things, we want to make sure that we're doing it in a way that is going to benefit our families, that's going to serve us today as well as tomorrow. And that I can have as much assurance as possible as you can in this world that this is actually going to work and prove to be of benefit. So if that's you, and maybe that's been holding you back from like homesteading, you've thought, gosh, I don't live maybe on a bunch of acreage, or I don't have a lot of money or even necessarily a lot of time to devote this. And so maybe it's held you from getting started. So let us know in the chat as well, if that's something that has been of concern for you. And then there is so much to do in life, especially even with homesteading, but with all of the things, you might worry that you don't have the time or energy to actually learn how to do everything. And you want to make the most of 2025, and you just don't know where to start. So if that's you, again, let us know in the chat. And the good news is we're going to be breaking down these 5 foundations for you. And we've got an assessment that's going to help you know where you should start. So we're going to talk about the fundamentals of a well-rounded homestead. Again, so you know those crucial areas that you need to focus on for your family, because your homestead and your journey within homesteading all should be tailored to you and your family and where you're at right now, as well as the picture and the path of where you want to go. So there may be things that look very similar, which is why we've highlighted the fundamentals that we're going to go through today on every homestead. But the actual homestead and the actual journey, and the criterias that you prioritize, those should be done completely to your family and not just copycatting someone else's homestead. So we're also going to be giving assessment levels. So when we get to those screens, there will be a replay of today's live stream. But as we get to those screens where the questions are up for your assessment, please feel free to, if you've got your phone out, you might be on your device, take a screenshot, or if you're watching this on desktop or laptop, take your phone and just take a photo of those screens so that you can come back to them. Okay. Because it's something that you're going to want to put a little bit of thought into most likely as you go through those. So you might not be able to quite answer them in depth as we go through just today. So make sure you grab those and we'll make sure they're highlighted for you. All right. And then we'll be going through at the very end, we're going to walk you through how to create that customized plan with those actionable steps. Because I know Jason and I know the Homestead movie, if you saw previews of that, as it looked a little bit apocalyptic. However, if you watch it, you'll realize that it is not meant to be from a place of fear. And neither Jason and I are advocates for that we want to give you actionable steps and things that you can do so that you can operate from that place of hope, make wise decisions, but not have fear being your primary motivator. Okay.
Definitely.
So, yeah. So our first foundation we have is shelter. And Jason, do you want to just give a little bit brief? So this is a clip from the movie. Do you want to give just a little bit brief of what the little video we're seeing here is?
Yes, this is the tent village, kind of in the middle of the homestead, where the folks who showed up without a place to stay are in wall tents. If you ever stayed in a wall tent, it can be done during the winter. It's probably not going to be your first choice. But here we're seeing folks who showed up without a better option and staying in canvas tents.
Yeah. So for the shelter aspect, for most of us have some type of shelter, right? Most of us have a house or an apartment, or the primary thing of shelter right now for most folks is something that we have. So, but that is really going to be one of our primary things is then looking at our shelter. For most people, as I said, it's going to be your home. And we're going to kind of walk through some of these things. And so looking at some of these things and being like, okay, do I have this in place? And if not, then what are some of these ideas, some things that I can work on this year in order to get that in place? So we all know no matter what, and that may look like in this type of scenario that the book and the movie shows, right? It was people traveling to somewhere, the house wasn't large enough for all of them, and so they created a community of tents. And so looking at your shelter, and we're going to walk kind of through these, but looking at that through the lens, if we had a prolonged power outage, if your home is powered by electricity or propane or whatever different things that you've got powering your home, kind of like, okay, what would I do in an emergency situation if that was cut off? And not necessarily for the apocalyptic part, quite honestly, but usually it's Mother Nature is where we see a lot of these things come into play. So I know where we live, we experience a lot of windstorms. I live in the Pacific Northwest up in the mountains, so mudslides or something that happen here, and they'll take out our power, and our power goes out usually at least once a quarter, if not once a month. But we always experience power outages, and the maximum one that I have went through personally was for 2 weeks we didn't have power. So thinking about your home and how it operates if you didn't have power, and ways that you could, increase your resilience there. So one, of course, is going to be heat. So how could you heat your home if you didn't have electricity or if the grid went down, that type of a thing? So we use a wood stove because I do live in a northern environment. Heat is actually really important for us for about nine to 10 months out of the year. Our summer is quite short here. So the wood stove is something where we do live on property. And so wood is a renewable resource here. It's something that we can harvest off of our own land. point, but knowing, and it is the primary way that we do heat our homes. So moving into some type of an emergency situation, it's not something new that we're going to have to learn how to use the fuel and how to get that using. It's just something that we use all of the time in order to heat our house. So that will be something that you obviously each person will need to look at and putting in, but just something to think about is how can I heat my home if, especially the electricity goes down. Now, for some of you, you're like, I can't put a wood stove in, or I don't live in an environment where I can get wood heat, etc. But if the power went out, there's different ways to think about that. I know, Jason, if you want to talk to that a little bit, if you've got any points.
Yeah, I mean, the wood heating is tricky if you're jumping into it at the last minute because of the risk of carbon monoxide, carbon dioxide. One of the easiest ways we've seen to restore heat to your family is actually by using body heat. And some of our friends in Texas employed a trick where they'd put a tent inside of their living room, and then you just use their body heat. And so as an emergency, and a tent inside of a tent or a tent inside of a living room, our homeless community here in the mountains will do a largish tent and put concrete blankets over top of the tent and then put a small tent inside. And that is 100% solution. Your body heat is very effective at warming up an area. So if you haven't kind of prepared for wood stove, which is the gold standard for heating your home in a pinch, or if you don't have wood nearby, just having a extra tents, especially one that would fit inside the other, can save your families from some serious discomfort, and it really works.
Yeah. Yeah. In fact, it's funny. When I was little, I grew up in a 1974 single wide trailer. So efficiency for heat, even with a wood stove, was, as you can imagine, was not one of them. And so we had a really cold spell that came through. And even with the wood stove going, it wasn't enough to reach the bedrooms that were in the back of the trailer. And so to your point, everybody came in and we just slept in the living room with the body heat. We didn't put a tent in, but next to the wood source, but yeah, just that body heat. And so they work really well. One of the other things I would also say to consider, and this is going to depend on like where you're at meeting needs, we're like trying to give lots of different options because we've got a lot of people coming in who are at different spots in their journey. So one thing that you could consider as well is a generator. So if your home does have, like a heat pump or something like that, and a wood stove isn't quite there yet, but you're like, oh, we've got the temp, but kind of want to go in between. And that would be considering getting a generator. And then, of course, the fuel storage that you would need in order to operate that. But that can also be a great way as kind of a bridge. And if wood is not something that's in your area, that's not, easily attained, that type of thing. So lots of options, but you definitely want to be considering that, right? Like how would we heat without electricity? And then next we've got is our cooking. And so this was one of my favorite, I have to say, this was one of my favorite parts of the movie, Jason. So I'm going to let you share what we're kind of just seeing here on the clip, and then we'll dive into this point too.
So in our case, the homestead, as you can see in the movie, is surrounded by a forest that's all oak and maple, and so they have an abundance of firewood stored up, and firewood just available to cut down dry. So in the case of the homestead story, they really rely on baking bread. Wheat is really inexpensive and easy to store in the Rocky Mountains because it's so dry here. Wheat doesn't go bad. Probably ever. And so bread ends up being in the storyline almost like currency, almost like, particularly when you go watch the TV show, bread becomes something that they both trade and use to help the surrounding community. So here we have Rick Baumgartner in the movie coming in and helping out with their coming up with some neat tricks for their bread baking operation.
Yeah, yeah, I really enjoyed this scene. Like I said, we're trying not to do any spoilers for those of you who haven't seen it yet, but you're going to want to go see it because I got very excited about this, and actually was talking to my husband about uh, getting a greenhouse and being able to heat it in this manner. And I'll just kind of leave it at that, and to test that out. So yeah, I was but into this point is having a way to cook. without electricity. And of course, in the movie that was showing with baking with a wood stove, the wood stove that we have here, we obviously use for heat. It can also be used for light, but I can also cook on it. And so um, it serves, I like tools on the homestead that can function in multiple manners if possible. But some really easy things for this, for knowing how to cook your food, is of course, a lot of people have a barbecue. You can do a lot with a barbecue. Learning how to smoke food. There's all kinds of different ways that we can cook food that doesn't require electricity. Obviously, your barbecue may be with charcoal or with wood, and or propane, and having those propane tanks and ready to go. But also knowing how to cook food when you're not in an emergency situation. I stress that enough, because when you're in an emergency situation, there's already so many things that you're going to be dealing with. And so if you've already got these skill sets down and know how to do things, so most folks know how to grill or fry on a barbecue, but you can bake on barbecues. There's lots of different things that you can learn to do. You can learn to cook outside. And I would also say one of the things is great is learning how to cook, like with Dutch ovens and things outside if you don't have a wood stove, or in the summer months, because we've talked a lot about heat because of this time of year right now. But also, if the power is down, you're not going to have air conditioning. And so in places, and historically, especially in the South, but they would have summer kitchens, or they'd have a dog trot where they would actually have a kitchen they would cook with in the summer that was separated from the sleeping quarters so that it didn't get too hot. So learning how to cook outside over an open fire or in a campfire type situation, one, it's super fun. Get your kids involved with that. Like, I don't know any kids who don't like getting to safely, of course, play with fire. But we do family Dutch oven cook-offs in the summer months, and so everybody gets to prepare a dish in a Dutch oven, and we come together, and we do this even with our extended family. And so the rule is it all has to be cooked in a Dutch oven or cast iron with fire. But then we have a meal together, and we do a judging of like whose dish is best, and wins for that. But it's really fun. It's a way to join together in community, to break bread together if you're doing that. But it's a great way to just get practice with those skill sets in a way that's fun. So that's also something to think about. So there's lots of different ways that we can cook without electricity, and just to really think about that along with the heat systems and cooling, if need be, around your home. So it might be something as simple as putting in an outdoor fire pit, or maybe a little bit of an outdoor kitchen. And of course, that's going to be look a little bit different for everybody where they live, but we all have these options. So just things to think about, especially as we move into the summer months, how you can kind of take advantage of that, learn some of those skill sets, and involve the whole family, and also provide really delicious food for yourself and your family. Now, one of the points I wanted to bring up real quick here is light. And as I said, our wood stove does provide some light because it has that glass front and it's in our living room. But thinking about your light sources without electricity, especially in winter months when daylight hours are reduced, or if you live in the far north, in the winter months, they're greatly reduced. And so, candles is one thing. Candles don't actually provide a ton of light. And so we really like the little lamp, the lantern that you see in the photo here. One, you can really store quite a bit of fuel. You can also store the wicks really easy. They provide a lot more light than candles do. They're a bit more efficient with their fuel than burning candles. So these can be a really great thing. Of course, with any light source like this, where it's an open flame, even though it's in the glass, is making sure that you've got places where it's up in an emergency. We don't want to deal with anything getting knocked over and then being flammable and setting anything on fire. So get kind of familiar with using them. But I love these when there's and it just helps to conserve fuel for a generator at night. If I don't need the generator to run anything really important, then we can turn that off, and then we'll still have some light sources. So just some things to think about. The like the headlamps work great. The little battery operated headlamps. We use those even in the winter months just to go out and feed the livestock and stuff. But did you have any points, Jason, you want to put in on just kind of some of that, those types of things to think about?
My little boys and I spent maybe a month this last summer off and on in a wall tent up in the mountains, living off solar as our light and power source. And I was amazed at how much solar, if I connected it to a Lion Energy battery bank, they make these several levels of battery bank. And if we connected a couple of small solar panels to a Lion Energy battery bank, it was incredible. We could run my dad's CPAP machine. We could run a refrigerator, an ice maker, music, cafe lights. I mean, we were living large out there in the middle of the highest mountains with relatively little solar. And solar panels and the lithium ion or the lithium ion batteries have become so affordable now that a solar generator, you can get a solar generator now for under $1,000, and the panels are just so inexpensive. So and then you don't have to worry about emissions from, say, a generator, because generator emissions are a little tricky because you want them close to where you're using your light, but you don't want a bunch of exhaust in your living space. So if you can, yeah, we're at the cutover point where it's actually probably quite a bit cheaper just to move to solar, unless you're living in a place that's super cloudy.
Yeah, we use solar for actually for our livestock, our poultry, for our perimeter netting, just to keep the predators off of them. And it works really good, except for about the month of January. And that's just because we're so gloomy here and the daylight hours are so truncated. So sometimes I'll still have to bring them up and give them an electric. They're dual, so I can actually charge the battery with electricity if there's not enough solar. So if you are in a northern environment, we can use those pretty successfully almost year round, even in the gloomy Pacific Northwest. And so they're great for smaller. So lots of great ideas for kind of depending on where you're at and your budget and what your needs are here. So for our assessment, okay, so this might be if you want to take a picture or screenshot. So this is just an assessment to do of your property and where you're at. And so how many days could you heat your home if the electricity was off with the existing setup that you've got right now? How many days could you cook if the electricity was off? And then if the power were out for an extended period of time, how long would you be able to cook, heat, and light your environment? And so these answers are probably going to be different for everybody, but they're definitely things that you want to take into account, because we always want to know where we are right now. And then, because if you don't have the data of where you are right now, right, then it's really hard to plan a path forward. You need to know where you're at and then the goal moving forward. And so this gives you a great starting point of knowing, okay, here's where I'm at. This is what we could do. And some of you might be answering, for those of you who've been homesteading for a little bit of time or have been thinking about this and implementing these things, you might be like, you know what, we actually could go for quite a while. Like this area, this foundation, we've got down. And so that's phenomenal to know, because then that will help direct your path to know where's the next area that we actually need to focus on now. So grab this screenshot real quick here. So I know we've got a lot of points to go through. There's so much to cover. So grab this so you can come back to this assessment and do this later, because some of you may are like, I'm not actually sure, like I kind of need to go and calculate out some things. So grab this, and then we're going to move on to our next foundation. So foundation number 2. So we're going to be talking about food and water, and we're going to be talking about it first in the context of humans, but then we'll also touch a little bit for those of you who want to have livestock, do have livestock, or planning on livestock. We'll incorporate that a little bit, but the majority of our focus will be on food and water for our humans. So this clip, Jason, do you want to share a little bit about what we're seeing here in this clip? Give some context.
So we're not in the Pacific Northwest here in the homestead. So we get 24 inches of water a year, which is roughly a third of what Melissa gets up where she's at. So we have to be very clever about water. And you can see in these pictures, we're using what are called thirsty earth cotta cups to grow potatoes, which is thirsty earth cotta cups use about 1% as much water as drip irrigation uses, which drip irrigation uses about 1% as much water as sprinklers. So we're really careful about every single drop of water here. So you need to take a look at not only where you're going to get your water from, because if the power goes out, you can't count on municipal water, but also how to get a little bit of water pressure behind it so you can continue to garden and to provide water for your livestock.
Yeah. And this was really fun because I don't want to give spoiler alerts. I kind of almost did. So you'll see this come into action if you watch the movie. hard time not spoiling things. I get so excited. I'm horrible at gift giving. I just want to tell everybody what it is before they get it because I get excited. But you'll understand the significance of why we picked that clip when you actually watch the movie in the Homestead movie itself. I don't know. I haven't actually got to see the series yet. Does that come up later down the road in the series, or is that kind of
Mm-hmm.
just in the movie? Okay.
It's both. Yeah.
Okay, awesome. All right. Well, we're going to move on in still within our food and water. So, want to talk about, we're going to kind of go through some food and water, and as you're building up your pantry, which I hope you are, in some food storage, we're going to kind of go through some of the different categories and things that you would want to keep on hand. Now, we do have a pantry prep ebook. So for those of you who are watching this live stream, if you didn't get registered on the registration page, because I know you guys are coming in all different ways, if you want to, we're giving anybody who's watching the live stream, we're going to give them that pantry prep ebook for free. So you can email us info@melissanorris.com if you didn't see that, or if you would like to get access to that, and it's just a free gift to you guys. So info@melissanorris.com. Shoot us an email if you're interested in that, and just put in the subject line pantry ebook, and we'll make sure and get you access to that. But with our food and water, we're going to start with some of our dry goods, because dry goods are you're already purchasing them as a dry good, and so it's just making sure you've got them in a storage area that is obviously no water. We don't want our dry goods in with moisture, and is protected for those types of things. So you want to think about having your grains. Obviously, that would include things like rice, your flours, and or wheat berries. To Jason's point earlier, he was talking about the wheat berries and how much longer wheat berries will store. So wheat berries, for those of you who aren't familiar, if you've never ground your own flour before, wheat berries are kernels of wheat, and they're called wheat berries, but they're a hard kernel. They don't look anything like a fruit berry or anything like that. But that's what you grind into to make your own flour. And so wheat berries have a much longer storage life than flour itself. You do have to have a flour mill in order to grind it yourself in order to make flour. So I hyphenated those and put flours and or wheat berries. So you'll kind of want to make some assessments there. Of course, rice, things like dried beans, sugar, and sweeteners. Most of these are things that were, with the exception of dried beans. Dried beans are actually extremely easy to grow in a garden. But most of these other things in that dry goods category, these aren't things that we're producing in a home garden environment. And so they're things that you're going to want to prepare with your food storage and to have on hand. Next up is going to be salt. Unless you live by the sea and have a way of evaporating that, salt's going to be something that's hard to come by. Unless, however, you live in Utah near Redmond Real Salt, who has an incredible salt mine. It's a natural sea deposit that is. It's only in the specific area of Utah where it's actually near the surface of the earth enough to mine from. Excellent salt, by the way. It's all that we use in our homestead for both our human consumption, my preserving, and we even use it with our livestock. But you're going to want salt. Salt is essential to humans, and it's not something most of us can produce on our own. But the great news is salt will last forever. If it gets wet, you just dry it out and then go ahead and use it. So definitely consider having your salt on hand. And like I said, I buy it in 25-pound bags just because it'll last forever, and it is essential to so many things that we do. So you want to make sure your salt's covered. And then fats. So things, if you don't have a dairy animal, which most people don't, you want to make sure that you've got, butter, lard, tallow, ghee, coconut oil, olive oil, whatever your fat of choice is. But without animal production, depending on where you live, like olive trees aren't going to grow where I live, nor coconuts. So fat source can actually be something that's a little bit harder to produce and to find, to go foraging for, or to produce on a homestead without some type of livestock. So making sure that you have got fats is going to be really important in your food storage, but obviously in our everyday cooking too. And I want to say, I create my food storage. We eat from our food storage and what we put up year round. And so my goal is that I'm investing in things that serve my family right now, as well as down and into the future, so that if something happens, I know how much food we've got on hand, how long that will take us, and I know how to replenish it, which are all things that you can learn. And this is just your starting point if you're like, whew. But my goal is for the things that you're stocking, that you are using them now again, in an emergency situation, it doesn't want to be all new. If you have wheat berries and you've never ground flour before, and you've never baked or cooked with fresh ground flour, because it is different. It's not a direct sub from flour you're used to buying already milled from you from the grocery store. There's a learning curve, and you don't want to go through learning curves with those types of things in an emergency situation. So I'm always sharing things, and my goal is these would be things that you would stock in your pantry and that you would be using in your everyday life right now. So up next, and that is going to be culinary herbs and spices. Now, there's a lot of herbs that a lot of us can grow in our gardens or even forage for. Spices a little bit different. That's why historically you look back and there was a spice trade, right? For like things like cinnamon and some of those different spices aren't going to possibly grow in your environment. Some will, depending on where you're at in the U.S. But so think about that. Think about things that I can't grow here. But a lot of your herbs and spices, not only do those help to give some flavor to some of these things like dried beans and rice, right? It can be a really good way to introduce flavor to them, but they can also be used medicinally. So they serve culinary purposes as well as medicinal purposes, and giving variety to your food storage. So on these specific food items we have here, do you have anything that you want to add to that, Jason?
No, just because appetite fatigue is real. So if you're preparing for a long term um, issue, just remember you will really suffer without spices and salts and fats. And the fats are a little trickier to because they don't necessarily, they're not as shelf stable as some of the options, but they're definitely worth investing in because getting tired of the food you're eating really makes it difficult to even just want to survive.
Yeah. Yeah, very true. Okay, up next, so we're still under our food and water. And from this clip, it might be a little bit hard to tell where he's at and the significance of that. So do you want to share a little bit about this one, Jason?
That's Jeff Erickson. In He's our special forces guy, and he's just here starting to see that there might be more to surviving as a community than just being great with a gun.
Yeah, that was a fun part that I loved seeing develop as in the movie and as it went on, and that I'm sure will be also be coming up in the series too, which I need to get in and watch those episodes. So one of the things that you want to be considering beyond what we just went through on your food and water is going to be, of course, your vegetables, your fruits, and your proteins. And so the wonderful news is your vegetables, fruits, and your protein, most of these items to some degree, of course, is going to depend a little bit on acreage and space there. But with the fruits and vegetables, you can be producing some of those wherever you live right now, even if you're using balcony or container gardening, etc. Especially for fruits and a lot of your culinary herbs, excuse me, your vegetables. Fruits can be a little bit harder, but you can actually grow some fruits in containers as well. And so those are something that everybody can begin producing a small amount for their family, as well as protein. So for your protein source, thinking about, of course, a lot of people, chickens, right? Chickens are going to produce daily protein in their eggs and or ducks. Also meat and or dairy. And there's lots of options for that. Now, you might be like, I'm not in a place where I'm looking to actually produce my own things of protein. But as you look at your food storage, this is definitely going to be some of the things that you want to make sure that you have in your food storage, you have in your pantry, and you obviously that you know how to cook those items, which most people know how to cook vegetables, fruits, and protein. So that shouldn't be too much of a stretch or even really a new skill necessarily. But with those, we are going to be talking about preservation methods. Food preservation is something that is a wonderful homestead skill, something I recommend. Everybody can do some type of food preservation, no matter where you're at right now. And even if you're not producing these items yourself, but maybe, and we're going to talk about that, diversifying where you get your food from. So cold storage, which is a deep freezer. So if you've got the ability to have a deep freezer, or if you just have a fridge freezer combo, taking advantage of the deep freezer is one option. Root cellar techniques are probably my favorite. So in the picture that you see here, you see me holding up that braid of garlic. So we raise all of our own garlic dry it, which is called curing, and then braid it. And that just hangs in our pantry. And that's using root cellar techniques without actually having a root cellar or a basement or even a garage. We don't have any of those items. And you can use root cellar techniques very successfully for a number of different vegetables. Garlic, onions, and winter squash are the top three that do phenomenally well in those types of environments. And then we have got immersion and fermenting. So that is going to be fermenting is very traditional way of preserving food, where you're creating a brine and you're using lacto fermentation to preserve that food, and it increases the health benefits with probiotics, pre-digestion, like so many things. So fermenting is an amazing way. The pickles there that you see, kind of like the little vial on the top of the jar there, those are fermented old-fashioned salt brine pickles. And so fermenting, there's many ways that you can do fermentation. Many cultures around the world still use it, and it's a historical way of preserving our food that's also very easy to do. You don't have to have a ton of equipment in order to do it. Of course, dehydrating, another really traditional historical way of preserving food, is a great way to preserve food. It's lightweight. It doesn't take up a lot of space. You can dehydrate some things without a dehydrator, or you can purchase a dehydrator that'll give you a little bit greater flexibility on things that you can dehydrate, and they're fairly inexpensive. Then we come canning. Canning is one of my love languages. I love canning. So there's both water bath and or steam canning, as well as pressure canning. I love canning because it allows me to create shelf-stable foods that I can then just go pop open and heat. I don't have to have extra water. So when the power's out, if water is an issue, I know I don't have to have water in order to rehydrate or to even cook most of the items. I can simply put them in a pot if it's something that needs to be heated to eat, or just eat it straight from the jar. So canning, I if you can't tell, I get really excited about canning. It's one of my favorite things. And then we've got salt and curing. So historically, salt curing can be done for some fruits, vegetables, definitely meat. It was a way that most meat was cured, and especially like places like Italy still use a lot of salt curing to do their meats without refrigeration. And then a more modern invention that you can now use and do at home is going to be a freeze dryer. So there is a lot of ways that you can preserve food at home. And so this is kind of just a highlight of those different ones. There's, of course, nuances to them, but all are really easy to do at home and produce great food and end results. So Jason, if you have anything you want to add here, please feel free.
No, that's terrific. I too am a passionate hot bath canner. So much fun.
Yeah, it is. It really is fun. And there's just something about I've actually had this conversation before. When you have a food storage put up and you have, food that you've canned specifically, there is something about that. I don't know if it's like ancestral DNA. I don't know. But when you look at it, it's like a work of art, but it brings such peace and relaxation. And I think it's because, like, you just know instinctively, I have got food available for my family. Like, it's beyond just like, oh, look what I did. Like, there's almost something primal about it in a really cool way. And I may have just went way into geekland, but that's okay.
Oh, totally. And when my wife makes like spaghetti or whatever, and she gets out my spaghetti sauce, I'm like, I helped make dinner, even though it was
Yeah.
months ago.
Right. Yeah. No, it's this. I get so excited for people to experience homesteading because I'm like, you
Yeah.
don't experience that from store bought. Like, it does bring this different level of like pride and satisfaction and just like good food. Like, if you're a foodie and you like to eat, oh my goodness, like the flavors and everything that you get from growing it yourself and preserving it, like you can't get it from a store. Like, that might be motivation alone there. So, okay, sorry. I will stop geeking on our food preservation because we have a lot more things to cover, but it is one of my favorites. So this one, if you haven't seen Homestead movie, Jason's going to share a little bit about what this clip is, and then we're going to dive into some ways that you can avoid this situation.
Well, we've kind of all seen this during COVID. We at least saw it on the news, and a lot of us in person, where the moment something goes down, the stores become difficult. If at all possible, this situation you want to avoid. Either get out ahead of it or be able to produce your own food.
Yeah. So I kind of made you'll see here, like obviously a little list. And so one of your reducing your supply chain dependency, and of course, that's going to be for some things you. So that could be garden, hunting, foraging, maybe all three together. Next option is going to be as local as possible. So maybe that's a neighbor who's growing something or producing something you're not. You can barter or purchase for them. Might be local farmers, local you pick farms, that type of thing. And then next up we're going would be regional. And so, for example, where we live, we have a feed mill. Like this is actually for our livestock. But an hour away from this, they actually bring in, and I can go and buy, and they mill it all there. It's all done fresh, and I can get all of our livestock food needs from them, which is really nice. And during COVID, that was sometimes the only way I could get certain things, was they were able to get it in. And then independent. So looking at things, for example, like Azure Standard. I already talked about Redmond Real Salt there in Utah, and are a favorite company and resource of mine. But those are independent, where they're mining it, and then it's going directly to you. And then last is you can still use chain. So obviously things like Costco's and Fred Meyer's, wherever it is you live, that would be common chains in your area. And so you can use those for seasonal bulk buys. You can use them for all the time stuff too, but especially for seasonal bulk buys, those can be a way, if you don't have any of the aforementioned for an item, still take advantage of that. But a way to reduce that dependency is a seasonal bulk buy. So when a food is in season, buy it in bulk, and then use some of those preservation methods to put it up. Because one, you'll be then putting food up for when it's not in season and it's more expensive. But secondly, you're creating that food in your own food storage from that at a good buy. So for most people, it's still a combination of these, but we're going to go through the assessment here that will give you some ideas that will help you walk through on how to move to more of those, in case everything you're doing is from a chain right now. So some of the things that you'll want to think about with our assessments is, how many days could you feed your family from the food that you have in your home right now? So if you have a closet or a pantry larder, or just maybe it's your fridge and your cupboards in your kitchen, whatever it is, how many days could you actually feed your family from the food that's in your house right now? Now, second part of this is, if the power were out for an extended time period, would that food still be good? So freezes and fridges, this is where we're looking at them, because if you don't have a generator in order to power those when the power is out, that food is not going to last. It's going to go bad. So how long would it stay good? And do you have the resources? Do you know how to preserve that food? So if power went down for a long period of time, you're like, oh, not a problem. I'd be able to jump in, take that food and preserve it with what we couldn't eat before it went bad. And then, do you know how to prepare meals and or cook with the food in your food storage? I know a lot of times people will buy kind of like survival food, and they'll put that up, but they've never cooked it. And so they don't actually know how to make meals from it their family would enjoy, or might realize, oh, like I'm actually missing a piece that I would need in order to make this into things. So this kind of a first level of assessment with your food. Do you have any other things that you would add in there, Jason, on the assessment part here?
Now, just to emphasize, like everything to do with preparedness, if you haven't tried it, if you haven't tested it out and proven you can do it reliably, every single time I've done that, I've learned, there was something I was missing.
Yeah. Yeah. So if you've got stuff in food storage, that's great. Just make sure you know how to prepare it and use it. Okay. Then the second part of this, and this is where I was in that supply chain dependency, reducing that. One is, this is really fun, and we still do this. And how many items on your plate did you grow, hunt, or forage yourself? And so that can be a really fun game. And maybe your goal throughout 2025 is like, I would like one thing on our plate to be something that we produced or hunted or foraged for. For those of you who've been doing it longer, maybe you're like, okay, I want to see if I can get everything on my plate for at least one meal that we have produced ourselves or hunt or foraged for. So kind of play a little game like that and make it by the end of 25. So make it something that you can do. That can be a really fun way. And we still enjoy doing that. So whenever we hit everything on the plate is from here. It's like a little victory. What methods are you using to preserve food? So this is something where if you aren't using any methods, you're going to want to pick one and start with that. If you are using of those methods we went through earlier, you're like, well, I'm doing 3 of those. Okay, what's the next one that you can learn this year? So we always want to be advancing just a little bit from wherever we are right now so that each year and or season, however you decide to do this, we're always learning and increasing and growing. So identify what methods do you need to learn. And then finding out when you are looking at your plate, if these aren't things that you can grow, hunt, or forage yourself, or maybe it's going to take you a while to be able to produce some of these things, is there a local farm or source that you could switch to? And so I don't have a dairy cow right now. We have in the past, but we don't currently. And so there is a local dairy from us. It's about 12 miles from us, which when you live rurally, that's actually pretty darn close. And so I get all of my milk from a local raw milk dairy that's in our county. So it might be that. It might not be that you're immediately going out and getting a dairy animal, but is there a local farm or a local food place or business or something like that that you could get some of those items from? And so look at your plate, and that can even be part of the game, right? Like, oh, I was able to get this, and I can tell you like the farmer's name or the name of the farm or that type of thing. So that might even be part of the goal, not just did we produce it ourselves. So these can be great ways to make sure that at the end of 25, you've got some of these things in place in comparison to now. Okay, we're going to jump into our third foundation, and that is talking about our health basics. This one I think oftentimes can get a little overlooked sometimes within homesteading and in preparedness and that type of thing. I don't know if that's been your experience, Jason, but I think it's something that definitely needs to be covered. So we've got this is a scene from the movie. So, Jason, I'll let you share enough so that I don't share too much and spoil it.
Let's just say that it's relatively manageable health emergencies, in the case of being 0% prepared, become uh, become vast problems. And just to start out, what we see almost immediately is basic interventions such as, do you know how to use a tourniquet? Have you been trained, or have you learned how to use the tourniquet that maybe you have in your first aid kit? Um, and then how would you deal with basically trauma, so you can stabilize trauma and then get help?
Yeah. Um, because in an emergency situation, right? Oftentimes EMS might not be able to get there. My husband's actually a volunteer EMT and that type of thing. So I feel very fortunate because I've got an EMT in the house. But things even like CPR, if you don't know how to do CPR, your local fire departments oftentimes will give classes on that. So check with them, check if you can go and just get some of those skill sets. So just basic first aid. So, burns, cuts, abrasions, things that honestly happen all the time, regardless if you're an emergency, and especially if you happen to be a klutz. And then things like upper respiratory. So this could just be with coughs and colds. Could be things if you have asthma, people who might have asthma or allergies, congestion. But ways that you know how to treat that, kind of recognize those symptoms and things at home. Again, so a lot of our common things: headaches, fevers, earaches. Now, of course, infections, viral versus bacteria. If it's a virus infection versus bacteria, some of those can get more complicated. But do you have the basic skill set to be able to help identify those, and then you have the items on hand to help to treat those and the knowledge on how to use them, to Jason's earlier point. Same thing for things like sprains, joint pain, muscles. A lot of these are, conditions that most people will experience, especially if you have a family, that type of thing. And knowing that you have the supplies on hand and that you know how to use them. Now, I will also move ahead, and the way that you are treating those, I would really encourage you to learn about plant knowledge and herbalism, because one, I that's how we treat all of our common things. So if the kids have a cough, a cold, a flu, any of those things, we use all natural items now. And it started for me personally. I'm actually allergic to Neosporin and all over the counter antibacteria type things. And so I had to start making my own because I break out in blisters with any type of ointment from the store. I actually was a pharmacy tech for 18 years, and even prescription stuff. It has to be an ingredient in the actual base of the cream and ointment is my only guess. But regardless, so I started looking at, okay, well, what can I actually have on hand then to use? And so slowly I did training on herbalism and learn. And now my kids just come to me because they've come to find that it works better for them. And so they are just now like, hey, mom, do you have the tea for this? Do you have a tincture for this? Or where's that salve, that type of thing? And the great thing about that is, one, it's things that you can produce now for your family. And now, modern medicine in itself is not bad. I have to tell you, if I have to have surgery, I'm going to be really, really happy for anesthesia. So not to discount that, but for a lot of things, having that plant knowledge, especially if there's a supply chain issue or roads are cut off, knowing what can you use that grows in your area or you're able to grow yourself, but having the knowledge on how to use it safely and effectively. Because I'm also going to preface both sides of the coin here. Just because something is natural doesn't mean that it doesn't have side effects or that it's safe to use for everybody in every situation. So you really want to have a deep understanding of how that herb works, when it shouldn't be used, with who it shouldn't be used, and its function, so that you can use it to its most effectiveness, but also in a safe manner. But highly recommend that you do look into that and start that now, because it's something. I'm always looking at like, okay, I can get that right now, but in a situation where I wouldn't be able to replace it from the store, what would my next move be? And so you'll kind of see that as we kind of almost do like a little bit like good, um, best and better, and helping identify through those. So our foundation 3 on health assessment is here. So one of the things also to consider is your overall health. So do you have chronic conditions, or maybe you're going through something that's acute right now, meaning it's something like you're like, oh, like I just sprained my ankle. So that's not necessarily something that's chronic. I hope you're not spraining your ankle chronically anyways. It's acute, but really taking a look at your health conditions, and saying, okay, is there things that I could maybe do to just improve my overall health now? Because in an emergency situation, you want to, and really in life in general, I want to be functioning at the highest ability that I can right now with my health. It's only going to serve me in an emergency situation that much more, but I want to be living my everyday life from a place of thriving. And so I've done some gut healing, and we don't have time to get into that whole story here, but there's quite a few things that you can do. So I would encourage you, if you deal especially with something that's chronic, is to start to look for ways to try to support your body in its healing journey with what that might be. Again, asking yourself, if I couldn't get to the store and or pharmacy, do I have what's needed to care for my family, at least from a first aid um, place? And then do you actually know basic first aid so you can put those supplies to use? Now, up next on our Foundation 3 assessment, how many items in your medicine cabinet are herbs? And it might be 0 right now, and that's totally fine. So maybe you're like, okay, I'm going to set out and look at what herbs I could use to help with a cough, or whatever maybe is something that your family tends to come down with, or tends to afflict you guys in a kind of a common, maybe seasonal type area. Next is, how many items in your medicine cabinet are you able to source yourself from your land and or foraging? And again, this may be 0 for you right now on both of these, but I hope by the end of 2025 that you can at least answer 1 to both of these questions, if not more of those. Okay, we're going to scooch along here to Foundation 4. I hope you all are good to keep going with us. There's a lot to cover here. But Foundation 4 is financial security. So Jason, do you want to share a little bit about what people are seeing on the screen here in the video clip?
We're seeing Ian Ross, who's kind of the founder designer of the Homestead. He has prepared by actually amassing gold currency, in this case called gold backs, which is a regional gold currency actually made out of gold. So, and we often think of financial security in like a worst case scenario as something tradable like gold or Krugerrands. But at the end of the day, if you go into a difficult time financially prepared with as little debt as possible, now you're talking. So a lot of times we jump a whole bunch of steps and go straight to gold. And I definitely believe in storing gold or Krugerrands in worst case scenario. But step number one, maybe ask yourself, what are we doing to be just financially stable in a middle case slow down scenario? Or do we have enough room on our credit cards to get out of town in a case of a really bad fire or flood or hurricane?
Yeah. So we have got an assessment here. So one of these, and you'll kind of notice some similarities on some of these foundations, is just knowing what your over financial health status is. So knowing, what bills do we have, what debt do we have, what do we have in savings, and those types of things, and just getting really honest with yourself. If you're somebody who tends to shy away from that, or maybe it's not something you're monitoring on a regular basis, we just need to know where things are. And so go through and just gather all of the things and see where your financial health status is. And then, do you have a budget and actually use it? If not, I would highly recommend that you look at creating a budget, deciding where your money is going to go, where it needs to go, and then sticking to that. It is an act of discipline to do that. And some of you might be like, yes, like we're already doing that. But some of you might be like, you might be kind of like, ooh, I feel very seen right now. I'm not doing that. And that's okay. Just start doing it now and use that discipline of telling your money and being cognizant of where it needs to go and sticking to that. It will serve you really well, especially as you're like, okay, if we stick to this budget with the funds that we have, then that means we've got some budgeted to put towards building out some of these homestead skills and doing that, and what that's going to mean for your family. Sometimes you just need to have that clear path, and that can help you stick to that. So another thing to consider with our financial health is, do you have skill sets and or a plan to acquire them? Skill sets can be things that you can use with bartering. We barter with neighbors all the time that have some skill sets that we don't. And so we'll do bartering. We have some things that they need. They have skill sets we need. We'll do bartering. Other times it could be using those skill sets or learning a new skill set that would allow you to maybe create a side business, or maybe in relation to your job, if you had this next skill set, it would allow you to get a raise. It would allow you, oftentimes we think of financial help of just saving. We absolutely should save first, right? We should look at it with a saving mindset. But sometimes, quite honestly, with financial health, you can't save or budget down any more than you already are. You need to find a way to increase the amount of money coming in. So we want to look at that from both aspects. And skill sets are often a way that you can do that in multiple fashion. Like I said, sometimes it's bartering. It's not always starting a business or being able to level up in a company. The other part is, are you using your homestead or slash homestead skills to help you get ahead financially? Now, this may be small. It might be selling your chicken eggs, which I know with the price of chicken eggs in some parts of the country right now, that actually is looking pretty profitable. It might be that you're making sourdough bread, like long fermented sourdough bread, and you've got people in your community that are like, oh my goodness, like I would love to buy some bread for you. Now, of course, you'll have to look at your own, cottage industry laws, depending on how big you would decide to do this, or where you live, that type of thing, when you're looking to actually sell things or services. But think about it. That might be a way that you're able to supplement. In fact, we've always done where we've always raised, most of the time, most animals, especially pigs and cattle and even chickens, they're herd animals or flock animals. They don't do well health-wise singularly. So we've always raised a beef for us when we first started, and then we raised a second one. So we would keep the one for us, and then we would sell the second one. And that allowed us to offset the cost of everything and provide, minus our labor, right? But kind of provide free beef for ourselves. And so we weren't necessarily making it, but I wasn't buying the beef from the store, and it was helping to cover our cost in order to raise it for ourselves. So might be something like that. And then think about in your homestead, all of life, right? But especially in homestead endeavors, are you acquiring investments or debt? And what I mean by that is if you are simply going out and spending hundreds of dollars on MREs that you're just putting up in case of a apocalyptic situation, that to me, you could look at that as an investment, but to me, that's more of a debt, because if I don't hit an apocalyptic situation or a situation where I'm going to be using that, um, then it's just sitting there. I would much rather take the funds that I have and learn how to can or how to ferment and then eat from those foods, so that whatever I put into my food storage, we're actually consuming and replenishing, and it's serving my family right now. And then if there was some type of emergency situation, it's going to serve us then too. So just kind of think about it, if that could be a lens that you view things, and making sure that if you are acquiring something, how do I help that to become an investment and not just a debt, for myself and my family. Now, foundation number 5 is community. And this was one of my favorite things about the Homestead movie. And so, Jason, if you want to share, I don't think this is a video clip, I think it's just a picture, but if you want to give people a little bit of context for this picture, and then we'll dive into this point a little more.
Yeah, this is where at the homestead you can see the gate in the background where all of their friends, of course, show up when the power goes out. 3 days later, there are 150 people in front of the gate, and they haven't actually thought through that possibility. And the homestead is forced. You're seeing Jenna Ross and Clara Ross in the picture. It's the mother of the home and her daughter, and they're being faced with the question: how do we help our friends and our neighbors who suddenly showed up at our gate and we did not plan to share? And so, of course, Jenna Ross, she's feeling called by God to lean into what does it look like? What do loaves and fishes look like in this situation?
Yeah. So community is, I think, something also that's not talked about a lot when people are thinking about homesteading, or kind of leaning into that to preparedness and that. But I will tell you that community is one of your biggest keys to thriving and being successful in any type of emergency situation, but even in a homesteading journey, which I hope is not an emergency situation for you. So community is so important. A lot of times you'll hear talked about, self-sufficiency, and that type of thing in reference to homesteading, or maybe in preparedness, kind of however you identify with ever of those two words. But really, even if we look historically at homesteading, they needed community. And they would come together for barn raisings, and they would come together for threshing parties and for butchering harvest parties, and different things like that. And so community was actually key even back then. It was really never, for anyways, long-term successful, a solo, completely island unto yourself. And so thinking about ways, and for some people, you might not have anybody yet in your immediate geographical location of community, that's interested in doing homesteading type things. And in this, my hope, and one of the reasons I was actually really excited for the movie and the series, is that more and more people will see it. And because it's this, it's a fictionalized story and well done production, that they'll go and see it in the movie theaters or on the Angel app, and it will get them to be thinking about it. And they're gonna be like, oh, maybe my, cousin Joe, or my neighbor Kim, who's been doing this, like, maybe they're not as silly as I thought. Or maybe it'll just open up a new line of communication, some thought processes, and create conversation. Because the more people that we have talking about homesteading, the more people will become aware of it as a possibility, and hopefully start implementing some of the things. But even for those of you who have been doing this for a while, community is so key because I'm gonna be real honest, and I'm sure, Jason, with your experience, homesteading can be hard. I don't ever want to paint a picture that it's just super easy and it's always awesome and amazing because that would be a lie. There is awesome and amazing things about it, 100%, and I firmly believe it's worth it, or I wouldn't still continue to do it myself. But there are times when it's hard. Like, I'll just be real. And those have been the times when I have people in my community, both my geographic community, but also online community, digital, which is obviously that's how we're hanging out right here. That I have called them just sobbing. I'll be honest, like, um, and then vice versa. But when those things happen, like, you need those people to, one, just to console you and to be like, I get it, sis, but then also help you to, wash the tears off your face and be like, come on, like, and help get you going again, and just to be that support system. So I feel like of all the foundations, community is so important and often underlooked. So there's ways, so we're going to do a quick assessment on this and then also help you guys walk through. And then we're going to open up for Q&A. I know we've went a little bit over, but I didn't feel like there was anything here on these points that we could skimp on and really should dive into. So community, both finding an online and digital community first, is a really great support system. And then finding people in your area. And that might be you mentoring somebody, or if you can find someone to mentor you, might be the way that happens. So one of the things
or
that we've
or if, yeah, sorry, Melissa, if you can rally
no, go.
around
Yeah.
preparedness. Like the whole time we've been sitting here, my neighbors have been blowing up my phone with text invitations to, hey, let's get together and talk about fire safety because we're up against the mountainside here in the Rocky Mountains, and we're all thinking about what can happen after the disasters we've seen this last year. That is an opportunity. And this is really how my neighborhood, we have a really, really strong preparedness community in my neighborhood. And we've been doing this for about 10 years together. We really came together originally around fire safety because we all agree. It doesn't matter where your politics are or where you think this world is headed. Just about everyone in the United States is subject to some natural disasters that we should be ready for. And we can always talk about that, ready for that. And then those conversations just naturally proceed into, where are you getting your water? And do you have a wheat grinder? And that has been naturally the easiest way to emerge into a conversation for us and build a community of preparedness.
Yeah. And I'll just say too, sometimes, like, that's great. And I completely agree with all of that. Like, fire, here, even in the Pacific Northwest, I get 78 inches of annual rainfall, but we have usually we get very little rainfall, if any, July, August, and for the first part of September. So we have wildfire danger here as well. But honestly, like, just be the neighbor that you want. Like, it's kind of that adage, like, be the friend that you want to have. And so if your neighbor, needs help with something, go over and offer some help and allow a relationship to be built as well. And that's going to help to foster community. But also I love, yes, having some of those meetings where you talk about those things. If you have a volunteer fire department, depending on where you live and how rural, volunteer fire departments are the only way that we have fire protection and EMS out here. And a lot of them really need volunteers. And even if you're not able to fully volunteer, going and asking, like, hey, is there anything that, I can do to help, or starting some community groups, like, yeah, super important. So whoops, I'm going to go back to this slide. So we're going to go now through some of your, what do you need? So this is where it's going to help take away some of that overwhelm and help you work through prioritizing the things that we talked about and the assessments we did earlier, so that you have next clear steps of action for yourself and your family. So what do you want in your pantry and on your homestead by the end of 2025? So I'm hoping that you're like, man, I want that bad boy fully stocked, but that's going to take some time to get there for most people. So think though about obviously food, but some of those other consumables and those skill sets that we had. And then you can begin to identify your tiers of need, so that as we go through the months, that will help you know, okay, this is the first thing I need to do. Once that's done, then I can move to this next one. So if you want to take a screenshot of that, feel free. And then we're going to jump to our tiers of need, so that can help you with that prioritizing that I was talking about here. So feel free to take a photo or screenshot this. Okay, we're going to jump to our tiers of need. Okay. So this is something you're going to obviously decide for your family, because based upon where you're at, what you're doing, what's important to you and all of that, it's going to change. But tier 1 is highest priority, right? Like number 1 is like number 1, first things first. So these are the items and or things that you absolutely cannot live without. So for most of us is some type of shelter, right? Then it's going to be water, and then food, and then, kind of down that list. Tier 2 is going to be medium priority. Now, you can do this as far as the foundations go, or even items within those foundations. So this is going to be where I look at that medium priority when I'm looking at things is like, okay, this would be great for us to have on the shelf, but I can make do without it. Like, we could survive without this if we had to, but it would be nice to have, right? So like, if I was looking at spices, you can't eat a spice in most cases independently of itself. So I would prioritize some of those other items first if I had to. If I'm like, nope, I actually do not have in the budget to add any more spices, I would be making sure that I had some of those, the fats and the dried grains, those types of things first. But then that would be medium priority, would be tier number 2. Once those are taken care of, I'm like, yep, I'm going to add these in. Tier number 3 is our lowest priority. So these are considered like luxury items, kind of. You don't absolutely need them, but if you can work it into your plan, they would make your day. Now, some of you are going to laugh over this. This is where like chocolate comes in, right? Some of you are like, no, that's highest priority. But really, none of us really, truly probably need chocolate. It would be considered a luxury item, but you're like, man, if things are going bad, like I really would like to have some chocolate. Mine would be 70% dark, hid with some dried cherries somewhere. Just putting that out there. It's my favorite in there. So that would be something that you would want to work in, but it's obviously not going to be your highest priority. So as we go through our prioritizing here, is taking into account of what you want to have, what you already have, and then determining what you actually need. So this old fashioned, get out a pen and paper, make a list that way. If you want to use like the note function on your phone, whatever it is, but just make a list and take some time to go through it. Off of that list, identify what you could grow or raise and or what you need to purchase. And it most likely will be a combination. Most people can't grow or raise every single thing themselves on their list, and be realistic in this, and then decide what you need to purchase. Identify where to purchase the items that you're not going to be growing, raising, or making yourself. Again, if you can find a local source, if you can buy it in bulk and or seasonable bulk to save yourself some money, that's fantastic. Then determine solutions if you don't have space to grow a garden. But I will say, you might not be able to do a full scale garden, but wherever you live, you can grow a few things and or raise livestock. So what steps can you take to build relationships with local farmers or producers to acquire what your needs are? And what are your options to get stocked up? So these are just questions to ask yourself to help you work through these. Again, we will have this on replay, or you can take screenshots here of these things. But this is going to help you come up for your plan based upon what you and your family need for this next coming year and your action steps. And one of the ways to help do that is this is both for myself and with Angel Studios and Homestead the movie. We've partnered together. We would love to give you this gift for the new year. And so as far as a digital community, as well as resources. And so Angel has been super generous. And for everybody who's watching this live or watches it later on the replay, you get 30 days free, unlimited access to the Pioneering Today Academy Plus. So you can go to melissaknorris.com/movie. And so you get access to everything inside the Pioneering Today Academy right now, starting as soon as you sign up. So we have got courses that walk you through everything when it comes to gardening. So backyard gardening, we've got backyard fruit orchard, permaculture, growing berry plants, in container gardening. Then we've got our whole food preserving. So what you'll see here, it's video with written charts, things that you can print out, worksheets, everything for you. We have a dehydrating course, fermenting, freeze drying, root cellaring, other methods such as salt curing and infusing extracts, how to properly freeze and package your food so that they stay good. And then we've got a full canning course, all on pressure canning and water bath canning. So we've got courses on herbal medicine, like you name it. And there's going to be a full course in there for you. So you can jump in where you're at right now, and take that path and have all of this for you. One of the other things is we've got our online community. So that is right now over 1,500 members who are homesteading, where you can go and get that support. And if you're looking for mentorship, we do live sessions every single month. We have a live session where I walk and mentor you through gardening. And then we have one where we come on and it's anything about homesteading that you want. So you've got those live mentor sessions so that you don't get stuck, and everything. So it is really an incredible asset for you. I hope that you take advantage of it, especially if you're like, oh man, we also have some community coupons and resources where if you're like, I don't know where to find some of this stuff, where is the best deal, or that type of thing. And even local resources within the community, people share local deals. Really, it is an incredible thing. So if you go to melissaknorris.com/movie, your first 30 days are totally free. I highly encourage you to take advantage of it. It is going to help you get to your goals and make 2025 be the homestead of your dreams. So what you'll come away with is effective and natural remedies for cold and flu season. As I said, everybody happens with cold and flu season, right? So I really want you to be equipped for things that you're going to be dealing with in everyday life, no matter what. Full pantry shelves with home food preservation, and we use safe and easy recipes. I don't want to put anything up on the shelf that I have to worry about botulism, because in an emergency situation, I don't want to have to try to get to a hospital that might have the antidote. So we're making sure that it's updated information. Stocked bath and body shelf, so natural body care items you've made yourself, and easy source of fresh produce and super greens, no matter where you live or the climate. We've got things you can do right now in your kitchen, no matter where you're at, that don't include grow lights, for doing microgreens and sprouts, and no grocery store prices. Plus, we have full fresh ground flour, regular baking, and sourdough. So you can have nutritious and delicious baked goods without the stress. So we've got a summary here of everything we went over, and then we're going to get to the Q&A part. So we've done our foundations here, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, that really cover all of the pillars, the foundations that you need for a homestead as life in general. We've got the 30 days free of the Pioneering Today Academy. We also have the episodes 1 through 5 of Homestead Family Survival, and that's streaming at Angel. And then there's brand partners. So some of the things that Jason was talking about that were in the Homestead movie. So the watering pots and a lot of some of those different solar items. The brand partners have provided deals on supplies at homesteadgear.com. And this, Jason, if you've got information on this, is how to help the Californians going with the horrible LA wildfires right now. And so you can find out how to do that at homestead.tv/California.
Yeah, we're absolutely praying for our folks in California. Wow, it's touched our production crew with Homestead and tens of thousands of Californians. It's just wow, and I don't think we're not looking at a future where disasters are going to back off. So anything we can do, as we say, for the Homestead movie, to prepare to share. And we can start right here, homestead.tv/California.
All right. Okay. Well, I think we've probably got some questions. I know, Jason, we ended up going a little bit longer. You get to stay on and do some Q&A with me?
Sounds so easy. It sounds so easy, Melissa. It's just a piece of cake, right? No,
Yeah.
and the truth about homesteading is you don't. It's one bite at a time, and every bite is so fun. And even though it sounds like you're adding to your life, the truth is Homesteading has simplified my family's life and saved us a ton of money, not just on making our own food, but by spending quality time as a family doing simple things that cost nothing. So just, I can't even, gosh, thinking back at how simplified our life has become the more we've practiced homesteading, and fancy dinners or fancy vacations or worrying about how to fill our time, that just all goes away. And now I have, and we've kind of just backed into homeschooling with our children and learning on the farm and learning together and spending more and more and more time together, doing simple things that fill our hearts. And we call it co-work. We get to go do stuff that matters together. And at the end of the day, that becomes kind of the most financially responsible thing we can do. So while homesteading may sound like, well, like banging, hammering down on all five foundations all at once, it sounds like it's difficult. It actually, I think we found, becomes easier and easier, and your life becomes quieter and quieter instead of more and more busy. So thank you, Melissa. That was fantastic. Can we take a couple questions?
Yeah, yeah.
All right, let's see them. All right. Are you going to serve them up to us, Micah? There we go.
There it is.
All right. Kyle Hope. Oh, this is one of my favorite questions. How much? And I want you to answer this, and then I'm going to answer it. And I'm going to like lock my answer down, so I'm probably wrong, but we'll get the right answer from you. How much acreage do I need to grow food for my family? Go, Melissa.
Yeah. Okay. I love this question, and I'm going to say it depends, which I know is never anybody's favorite answer. But it truly does. It depends on what your goals are going to be. If you're wanting to incorporate livestock and larger livestock like cattle, like if you're wanting to have beef cattle or you're wanting to do pigs, right? Then one geographical location is going to be determinant on that. If you live in an arid southern part and you're wanting to do full grass fed, which I hope you are, especially with any ruminant animals such as cattle, you're going to need a lot more acreage per animal. However, if you live where I do up in the Pacific Northwest and you have good soil fertility, if you have good soil fertility, you can do an acre per cow here. So there's some variance there. But when it comes to like fruit and vegetable production, so even though we have acreage because we do have a herd of grass-fed cattle, we run 29 head of cows and then sell beef to our local community. I do not ship, but if you live in my area, then we provide beef just in our local area for our community. However, for my family of four, producing 70% of our fruits and vegetables for the entire year, meaning I don't buy those items from the grocery store, it's in a half acre of our yard that all of my fruit and vegetable production happens. So you can grow a lot using permaculture techniques, using multi-season planting, and those types of things when it just fruits and vegetables and herbs alone. So it depends, but start with where you're at right now. Like it may not be the exact size that you hope to be on. Wherever you're at right now, just start and learn to maximize that area. And then as opportunities open up and you're able to expand or move, then you'll already have those skill sets under your belt. So, okay, Jason, what's yours?
All right. I'm a big fan. We've talked about this before. I'm a big fan of permaculture. And permaculture is kind of messy, intensive, super easy gardening because you kind of plant once and your bushes and trees and vines grow forever. So when people ask me that, I say, how big's your yard? Because that's probably all you can do in the next 3 years. Permaculture, 1 acre of permaculture heaven help you. That'll eat 5 years of your life to get that like humming. So small is great, especially if you're going to turn over some yard and turn some grass into permaculture. So I think unless you jump into pasture animals, as you pointed out, Melissa, unless you jump into pasture animals, boy, a 1/4 acre is a lot. You can do chickens. You can definitely do rabbits. You maybe need to go a little bigger for goats, but then you can plant the heck out of fruit trees, berry bushes, and there's a ton of other perennial vegetables that you can grow. And the Russians, they do a lot of things wrong. but they do this right. Their whole ecosystem's built on sub-quarter acre lots, kind of outside of the cities, and they produce over 60% of their national fruits and vegetables on these little quarter acre lots. And they're packed. They're just packed with flowers and fruits and trees. And that is some of the most effective way to plant. So do not think you need 10 acres. That is the magic number I hear. Yes, if you're going to have cattle or sheep, 10 acres, goats even, that's way too big. So small is fine. Get started with what you have.
Yeah, I agree. And I love permaculture. Permaculture is awesome.
And get rid of your
Okay.
lawn. That's the permaculture pastor in me.
I like the permaculture pastor. I like that.
All right, Maria Johnson says, what's the first thing to do to prepare for disaster? What a great question. All right, what would you say? First thing to do, Melissa, prepare for disaster.
Yeah. Honestly, the first thing to do to prepare for disaster is to have a plan ahead of time.
Mm,
Because if you don't have a plan and disaster hits, like adrenaline is spiked, fight or flight comes in, and you can't think clearly in most cases. And so if you have a plan ahead of time that you can go to and execute, that's going to be your best defense. And obviously, some of that depends on what is the disaster. Is it something where you can shelter in place? Is it going to be something you have to evacuate from? Right? Like there's different disasters, and each one of those is going to have obviously a different plan. Um, that needs to be put in place. So I would say look at your area where you live. What are the most common natural disasters that would happen in your area? So for me, it's wildfire in the summer, it's flood and mudslides in the winter months in most cases, or big windstorms, but we don't get tornadoes or hurricanes here where I live, right? So that's not something I'm prepping for. So know what your environment, what natural or type of disasters could happen, and then create a plan of action for those. And that's really my best advice, at least in a general situation.
Yeah, I'm thinking, of course, of fire because the fire is in LA, but also we've had 3 times our home's been threatened by fire in the Rocky Mountains, and we have the black and yellow Costco totes with a list taped on top of "Don't forget these things" like medications, your passport. Um, uh, I forget what else, but we have, I think it's 4 totes that we can, and a couple of backpacks that we can pick up, throw in the back of the SUV and drive out because we've had to do that before. And then we have a couple of totes with family keepsakes. So be ready to relocate at a moment's notice. Within 5 minutes, you're out of your house with just the bare minimum of what you'd need. You're not going to need loads and loads of food storage for that. You're not going to need, a water supply system. You may want a water filter. But be ready to have those basics, basically a bug out tote that'll fit in your vehicle and you can drive away and your family will be okay for a while.
Yeah. And I'll just add to that on the livestock portion, if you're looking at having to leave and evacuate, just because we do have livestock, is like there's no way that we could trailer all 29 of our cattle or even get them loaded up in a safe amount of time. Like it's sadly, it's just not a reality. And so our plan is you open all the gates because that gives them
Wow.
at least an opportunity to be able to flee and to get to safety if possible. Now, if we only had like 1 or 2 cows and they were halter trained, that would be a different story. We would know that we would get them in the stock trailer and go. But if you have a herd, it's not an option. So even thinking a little bit about that, like what is the thing that I can do to give them the absolute best chance if we have to leave within like 5 minutes? So it'd be like somebody's grabbing this stuff, somebody's opening the gates, and then and then we've got our route. So yeah, think about that. And of course, sheltering in place is going to be really the 5 foundations that we just kind of talked about. Um, Getting those in place. Yeah. Yeah. Great question.
Yes. Staying home, I wouldn't, there's very few circumstances where in a collapse I'd be leaving my home. If you shelter
Same.
in place, definitely the option. Okay, Alan says, we're a large family of 10. All right. Do you have any resources or advice for large families? We have 7 kids, so we're right there with you, Alan. Resources or advice for large families?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, it really is, you would be doing the same things, but obviously multiplying them for your family size. But when you do have that many children, like involve them, involve them with your prep and even with gardening. I mean, as Jason shared a little bit, like I grew up on a homestead, and some of my earliest memories, like I was always helping. I remember when I was really little, my mom would go before me and make the hole to put the seeds in the garden because I wouldn't get the depth right or even in proper place. And then I would go behind her and put the seeds in the holes that she had done for me. Now, did that take way more time than her doing it herself? Absolutely. Um, but I was with her and involved in the process. And then the next year, I was old enough to figure out the depth myself, and then eventually, I was helping to plant a lot of the garden and canning and stuff with my mom. So find ways to involve your kids with the work and make it a family affair. Oh, and my power just blipped, but I'm still here. So
Yeah, I would definitely agree. Actually, community is the key, and a large family is much, much stronger than a smaller family. It may sound like a smaller family is easier to move around or defend, but a large family is much more, or a large clan or a whole community neighborhood. Community is power in survival situations. We've seen this over and over again. We've seen it in disasters. We've seen it in history. So, like you said, turn your children into assets. My 9-year-old and 10-year-old are so useful now. They would be the ones turning the goats out. They would be fully capable of rallying the dogs, fully capable of putting together dog food. Put more responsibility on them, especially responsibility where they get to use their hands and their minds to figure out solutions. So, congrats on having such a large family. That's fantastic. And from what we've seen, yeah, particularly when you have little ones, it seems like a lot, and you may want to have a wagon or, the running carriages to get kids moved around if you really do need to move them. That starts to make a lot of sense. Like a garden wagon is so useful when you're moving kids and their stuff around. But more than that, more than anything, get them as capable as you can as soon as you can.
yeah, yeah, great question.
Sounds like we have three. It sounds like we have three more questions. How do I grow Nestle's Crunch? Carl, the bigger question for me is how do I grow coffee? Because when we're talking about tier one necessities, I don't know. I don't know how my wife and I would function without coffee. But Nestle's Crunch, chocolate actually stands up pretty well over time, so you can get close.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm with you. Coffee is definitely one of my priorities. I haven't figured out how to do roasting my own beans yet, but I definitely do have my coffee beans and a grinder on the ready.
Yep.
So, yeah.
Instant kind of lasts forever. So instant is now you don't switch to instant. You just know that you can get used to instant or chicory. We have wild chicory that grows all around the homestead, and so
Yeah.
I got to do that this year is dig a bunch of it up and
Yeah.
actually get it
And
growing.
that'd be awesome. And if you have a freeze dryer, we have that freeze dryer module in the Pioneering State Academy.
Mm.
You can make your own coffee. I'm in the Pacific Northwest, man. I make my own coffee. But you can freeze dry it. So you can make your homemade lattes and then you can freeze dry them and then you have good quality instant coffee on the
There
shelf.
you go. All right,
Yeah.
fantastic. But no
Okay.
help there on Nest. All right, Neil.
No.
Neil said, you get your water pressure from gravity or backup power? What a great question. Because we think of water as like if we have a stream running through or if we have a pond, um, that we have water. No, you don't. You have
Yeah.
groundwater. You have surface water, pardon, sitting on top of the surface. How do you get any? You have to get some elevation on that water before it's of any
Hmm.
use to you. So, and the question is, how would you do that? Do you have backup power, or is there a natural way to get water pressure, particularly into your garden? because you don't drink that much water, but your livestock in your garden is going to need considerable water. In our case on the homestead that you see in the movie, we actually have 21 kilowatts of solar power in a well. So we pump with solar power with a Lion Energy battery system. We pump that water up the hill, and it's at 200 feet up on top of the hill. When you see this show, and you see the kid, you'll when you see the TV show, you see the Abe and Claire fishing. Up there at the fishing pond is actually water tank that is 10,000 gallons that pressure feeds all of the agricultural, so our water cannons, as well as our gardening. So we actually use way more water in the orchard vineyard than we do in just the simple gardens. So that's one way to do it. The best way to do it for most people is to do rainwater catchment right off your roof. So if you can catch rainwater high enough, which doesn't have to be very high for like Cotta cups or even some drip systems, if you can catch and hold water in IBC tote tanks or other kind of plastic tanks and hold it up there high that you just peeled it off your roof, and then you let that little bit of gravity, you only need like 6 or 7 feet of gravity to fully power a garden system. Then you'd be amazed when you do the math at how much water comes off your roof. It's way more water than you would typically need, even in a dry place like here in the Rocky Mountains or Arizona. In the Pacific Northwest is just like insane amounts of water. You couldn't store it all.
Yeah. Yeah, we have for the livestock, we have some sloughs that provide water throughout the rainy season. And then there's the one does go dry usually about August. So for about an 6 to 8 week period, it's dry. So we do have a backup generator that will actually power our well. So it has to have enough running watts, obviously, in order to do that. And so that's kind of our system for right now, because really the amount of fuel that's stored to run that just long enough to fill the livestock tanks for that many cattle is very doable, but it's not a long-term solution. So we're looking at some of the more high-powered hand wells to be able to put in tandem, where we've already got our wells, and then would have the troughs near there to be filled up. So yeah, I think again, really depends on like what your needs are. Like if you don't have livestock, to your point, like drinking water and just watering plants and stuff, you probably don't need to look at how it's more of a comfort thing, right? Like I could just go turn the generator on and have that much water running right into the house, but it's not necessarily a really long-term need there.
Yeah. Drinking is the easiest part of that equation. Gardening is the hardest. So for us, in a lot of the U.S., where you do require what it is necessary to water your plants, you do have to figure that out. And counting on gasoline generators or propane generators, I don't really count on that for anything. It's just fuel. It doesn't keep very long. Propane keeps a lot longer, but it takes a heck of a lot of propane to support a homestead. So I've opted for solar, and they also have direct drive solar pumps. If you're not in a place that's super cloudy, that you don't even need a battery. That the water serves as your battery. So the solar panel will pump your water up the hill, and then you'll have it whenever you need it. So the tank up the hill or the elevated tank serves as your battery. So anyway, there's a lot of tricky ways to do that, especially since solar is just getting so much cheaper.
Yeah, it's nice to
All right,
see.
next question. Sue, can you talk about storing food for our pets? Wow, that is a tricky question. How do you do that, Melissa?
Yeah, that's a great question, Sue. So, part of that is obviously, like what type of pets you have. So most people I'm going to assume is probably like cat and dog would be kind of your most, normal pets. So one is, like the buying in bulk or buying up extra bags and keeping them, like in a dry barrel or something where it's going to keep. But again, that's only going to, going to keep for so long. But that can be for short term, right? You're like, oh man, like, I can't get to the store. There's like a disruption or there's a slide or a flood or something, kind of more short term. Having just some extra on hand is really smart. But when it comes to really long term, so there's lots of ways that, when it comes to dogs is, looking at historically, what did dogs or wild, what did they eat? So a lot of that would be like raw, which is going to be harder to get raw meat, and most domesticated pets, dogs now don't really have that full hunting instinct, except if you have uh, chickens. Sometimes there has to be some tricky training there. So For us, like I look at my grandma, she made cornbread every night for her dog and put extra eggs in it and no sugar and baked cornbread, and that's what she fed her dogs the whole time that she had them. Now, as far as, is grain best for the animal, and like if it's meeting all the micronutrients like exactly formulated like dog food? No, I'm sure it's not. But just looking historically, was table scraps or bones, and supplementing is what, they did back in the day. Now, looking at a homestead, like if we look back at farms and a little bit more historically, where they had multiple things of livestock. So they had the dairy animals, and the extra milk and whey would go to feed the pigs, and some of that milk would go to feed the cats and would go to feed the dogs. And so it was a little bit more contained cycle of being able to support everything. Again, I realize not everybody is at that point and is doing that. I don't have a dairy animal at the moment. But kind of just looking at that, looking at some of those historical things, and seeing, or, coming up with some of the own where you're able to source the ingredients and come up with your own dog food, but from things that store well. But also making sure that your dog does well on that. It's the same as people. If that dog's always been fed, a certain brand of dog food or dry dog food, and then all of a sudden you're trying to switch to this other thing, you'll want to slowly incorporate that and do some testing to make sure they do well on it. So short term would just be obviously, buy a couple extra 50-pound bags of food and have those in an area, and then rotate through them so that they're not going bad, but that you've got a date on those that, like, okay, now it's time to use them, and then put the bulk in back. I don't know if you've got any better solutions on that
I
one.
don't I don't know of any long-term solution for what we'd consider modern dog food,
Yeah.
because it's so full of fat and proteins it goes rancid. Same problem we have with human stored fats and proteins like olive oil, which is actually pretty good for storing, but pretty good means like a year in this case. So, but your dog would need, dogs and cats are hugely useful. I mean, our dogs and cats
Mhm.
really work on the farm. We have livestock protection dogs, we have vermin control cats, and they work. They provide, and then as early warning, dogs are extremely important. Have been used by humanity forever to be the eyes and ears and allow you to sleep. And so dogs are super useful. And as you described, Melissa, once you kind of get your basic food storage down and you're sharing table scraps with the dogs, which there are less and less table scraps in a really desperate situation, you find yourself moving into chickens. I see chickens as the kind of the gateway drug to full homesteading, and then
Yes.
rabbits. Moving to rabbits is actually really, the rabbits are even easier than chickens to grow and raise and to develop fats and proteins. And then I see a lot of people bump into goats, hogs, or cattle, or all three of
Mhm.
those. And then if you live in an area that backs up against wilderness, like in our case, we have deer population would get a lot of pressure, but we're actually able to protect deer, turkeys, and elk in our case, and to create a wild meat population. In a lot of the United States, deer wouldn't get wiped out. They would have a really hard time at first, but then could be protected and raised almost like domesticated animals, and they'd feed your dogs as well as you. So, in
Yeah.
any case, it's not an easy question. There is no way to just, that I know of, to store up dog food and cat food and expect it to be good 2 years from now.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. But I'm with you. No more questions. Okay. Um, okay, I know the team's like, "Hey, we were supposed to go for an hour." But yeah, there's so many things that we could talk about. This has been so much fun. But I'm with you on barn cats for vermin control, especially if you've got food storage and and storing food for your livestock, grains and stuff, that having some good barn cats, and they're going to be, if they're already out mousing, they're probably going to be able to take care of themselves pretty well. I think probably better than our dogs, honestly. just with their hunting abilities. So anyways, this has been so much fun. Jason, thank you so much for coming on here with me. This has been a blast. And just that reminder, if you have 30 days paid for you already by Angel Studios, if you want to learn these skill sets right now, step by step, jump in with instruction at melissaknorris.com movie. And if you haven't watched the movie yet, please do go and check that out. I think it's still in theaters for a little bit. So highly encourage that you go and watch that. And yeah, so thank you so much, guys. This has been a blast. I had so much fun and such great questions. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Melissa. And thank you, everybody, for sharing your afternoon with us. And we will see you next time.
Lighting candles in the flood, I see something in the blood saying, dear soul, do not fear. Why should I fear? Bones and shadows have no power here. Climbing out of the dark, won't let fear determine who we are. Is everybody scared? Is there anybody there? Tell me, where do we go from here? I remember in my sleep, you whisper into me, saying, dear soul, do not fear. Why should I fear? Bones and shadows have no power here. Climbing out of the dark, won't let fear determine who we are.